Okay, I'm going to finish up Chapter 9 lecture and do Chapter 10 lecture just as quick as I can because I really want my break to start. It's time to go on vacation. I'm through with my office hours. I still have to go load this and get it up, so let's do it. Okay, children with learning problems. Mental retardation, or as is also known as developmentally disabilities. These are what mental retardation has a couple of different things that are necessary. It is a global IQ score of 70 or less with adaptive deficits. The adaptive deficits mean that they have some difficulties dealing with other people, particularly people their age. And these things have to happen before they are 18 years of age. If it happens after they're 18 years of age due to illness or accident, they are considered something different and are not allowed or don't have the right to special education. So this is 2 standard deviations below the norm, about 1% of the population, with 3 boys to every 2 girls that are labeled mentally retarded, and that goes from mild, which is around 70, to profound, which is below 20 or so on the IQ score. Learning disabilities, this is an achievement level in one or more areas that are below predicted IQ levels. So if one person has a global IQ of 100 or 120 and is reading or does math or has some other difficulties, and they're 2 or 3 grades below what they should be, then they are considered to have a learning disability. About 4/5 of people with learning disabilities have dyslexia, which just means a difficulty in reading. Boys and girls are about equal. This does appear to be genetic, and there's actually a wide range of types of dyslexia, but at least some types have an inability to recognize that words are made up of phonemes. If you remember us talking about phonetic versus whole word learning to read. Words can be backwards, they can be upside down, they can change each time the person looks at them. Some forms of dyslexia, they actually really focus in on the white space around the words instead of the words themselves. One of the things that can help some people with some forms of dyslexia is to decrease the contrast in what they're trying to read. So some of them wear colored glasses, some of them cover papers with clear colored plastic. If you notice, I tend to give my exams on colored paper. That's pretty much why I tend to do that. ADD, ADHD. This is 2 to 11% of the world population, 3 to 5% of the U.S. This includes persistent inattention and distractibility, problems with impulsivity, impulse control problems, low tolerance for frustration, and inappropriate overactivity. There are actually 2 sets of symptoms, the attention deficit disorder and the hyperactive disorder, but about 85% of people have both. This is about 1/4 of the people with LD have ADHD. It seems to be primarily hereditary, but it can include things like premature birth, mother's alcohol and drug use, lead exposure, brain injury. It seems to include small prefrontal lobes. Ritalin, which is a speed, a form of amphetamine, and behavioral modification tend to be better than just behavioral modification techniques. Some other disorders may be present in this situation, including depression and anxiety. Fairly, you will find that we all have some trouble with dealing with the real world from time to time. But if you have more difficulty, then it just increases the chances that you're going to have some depression, some anxiety problems. Education of children with disabilities. This is handled under federal and state special education laws and rules and such. Individuals with Disability Education Act, that is the IDEA, ensures that all children will have a free, appropriate public education regardless of their abilities. This is one of the places I have a little trouble with. I did special ed for a long time. What I have trouble with is determining what exactly is an appropriate public education. Actually, there are two parts to it. It is to be a free, appropriate public education, and it's supposed to be in the least restrictive environment. When I was trained to be a teacher, what we learned was that the most appropriate education for our students was the education that would best prepare them for life after public education. And the least restrictive environment was where they learned those skills the best. So generally what we focused on was living skills, how to balance a checkbook, how to shop, how to find the doctor's office, what to tell the doctor, just how to work, how to get to work, how to get home, how to cook. And it was believed, and it still is believed, that the best place to learn these things were in the actual situation. So we spent a lot of time on community-based instruction, going places where the kids needed to learn what they needed to learn. That shifted, and inclusion programs became really the end-all and be-all of special education on a lot of levels. The powers that be, somebody who probably never taught a special ed child, decided that the most appropriate education was an education that was as close to the regular education curriculum as possible. And the least restrictive environment was an environment as close to the regular classroom environment as possible. The emphasis shifted to become get your kids into more and more regular ed classrooms. Personally, I don't give a rat's ass whether my students knew what the 50 states were, who the president was. Most of them couldn't read and write, so that pretty much took those things out. What we wanted to do was teach them the things they needed to get by, to be as independent as possible. That became more and more difficult. I no longer do that sort of thing. We did inclusion, but more on areas that were a little bit more appropriate. A lot of my students could do music, so could sing. So we did choir, we did PE, we did art. We did things that really they didn't stand out quite as much as they did in other regular ed classrooms. And that's not to mention just the fact that I think the regular ed classrooms are really crappy for regular ed students, so I don't know why we were trying to teach our special ed students in those crappy environments. Gifted children. Gifted children are on the opposite end. There's about 1 to 2% of them also, and they're 2 standard deviations above the norm. So you've got an IQ score of 130 or higher, and what you also see is they tend to have the same kind of socialization problems that the kids at the other end have. It seems a lot has to deal with just the ability to interact with the quote normal unquote population. Both ends have problems with this, pardon me. But the problem with the Gifted Children program is, we've talked about it, kids who are creative, disadvantaged, kids who don't read well, so learning disabilities, they tend to be excluded from gifted children programs, even though they may be extremely gifted in some areas. So I think some work needs to be done on this one. Creativity is real important. Most of what we deal with looks at thinking convergently, where there's only one answer. This is what we do most of our testing to determine on children. But people who are extremely creative tend to come up with lots of different possibilities rather than one type of answer. What is real interesting is that they're now starting to push the instruction of creativity, but they want to standardize it. So we're supposed to create or teach creativity, but do it in a way that everybody does it the same way, seeking a single answer, back-assward. Gifted children, there's really two ways that people deal with this, school systems deal with this. There's enrichment, having a gifted and talented class program that really looks at just broadening what's going on in regular classrooms. The activities tend to be more extensive than in regular classrooms. The demands are higher, but then there are also other things that are there to try to keep the kids involved and let them hopefully gain their maximum potential. Acceleration, skipping classes or grades, speeds up education and by jumping through different grades. I think about the youngest I've heard going to college was about 10. They got all the way through school and into college by 10. That's really, I don't know that there is a right or wrong way here. People say, well, you know, if you let them accelerate, then they lose the chances of being a child and going through school with their peers. But then on the other hand, a lot of these students really don't interact well with their peers. And if a 10-year-old has the intellect of a college student, then the college environment may be more appropriate for them because they get to interact with people who are more on their level. Kids who are in enrichment classes who are that intelligent tend to only talk to their teachers and maybe some other kids in their programs who think on the same level. So it's none of this is black and white. It's all gray. And what I'd really like is if they based a lot more of it, especially the inclusion and stuff, on actual data instead of just what looks and feels good. Okay, if you want to take a break for just a minute, go ahead. In fact, I recommend that you take a break about every 15 minutes and just pause it or something and come back to it later. It'll be here. Okay. Again, I'm going to buzz through this just as quick as I can and get all the information that I feel like we have to have. Okay, cognitive development, Neil Piaget and representational systems. We are now in Piaget's third stage of development as far as self-definition. So instead of using those single, separated, different ideas or concepts about themselves, they are now integrating the different aspects and coming up with a much more realistic and broader concept of themselves. Self-esteem is still very important. We're here and dealing with Erikson's fourth stage and fourth crisis, which is industry versus inferiority. So what they're trying to do is, well, the virtue is competence, and this is the ability to master skills and complete tasks. Erikson said that if successful resolution of the crisis, they learn to be independent and feel that they are able to do what they need to do to get by. If it's unsuccessful, if they lean too much towards inferiority, they tend to be reclusive and they don't trust themselves to be able to do things, so they don't try to do things, and they tend to retreat into safety zones. If they go too much the other way and industry is too much important, they may turn in, as far as Erickson was concerned, they may turn into workaholics and neglect such things as social relationships. So family and friends can help in this situation. Can help or hinder. It kind of depends. Emotional growth. Kids at this age are aware of feeling shame, guilt, and pride. This shows that they are internalizing these rules and starting to understand what they mean. They start to understand that other people have emotions and how to express their emotions, both themselves and other people. And they start to learn emotional self-regulation, which is something I hope we all do, but I haven't noticed that all of us have control, particularly all the time, and I myself am no better than most as far as it goes. But again, hopefully we are learning to do these things better by this time. Parenting issues at this stage. It's time for you to start backing off a little bit. Co-regulation is a transitional stage in the control of behavior in which the parent starts to give up power and really just maintains a general supervision. You kind of set the boundaries. Okay, well, you go out and play. Be back in a couple of hours. Don't cross the street. Those sorts of things. And then it's up to them to self-regulate while they're doing moment-to-moment things. So with things like when they're little, if they're having trouble with their friends or peers, parents tend to step in and deal with things. Now we need to be more a consultant or somebody to advise them. They are better they're more likely to follow our advice if they see us as knowledgeable and fair. And thinking that they have, we want them the best for them. But the kid needs to make most of the decisions and the moment-to-moment type of stuff. And enjoy that time when they think that you actually know something, because when they hit adolescence, you're not going to know squat anymore. Discipline should be using inductive techniques. We need to be working away from punishing them and controlling them through power. They're getting bigger. Most of us are not controlled primarily through power, though government uses quite a bit of threats as a way to control us. You look around, you see how well that stuff works. It helps when they buy into what we have to say. Working mothers. The mothers who worked is not all that old a thing. Prior to the 50s, most women didn't work. Early studies indicated that moms who worked had children who had more problems. But since that time, further research has kind of indicated that what they were looking at was the fact that the first women to work tended to be poor women. So we were looking actually at effects of poverty and not whether mom worked or not. So now about 80% of moms with kids in the school age range are working. There are some things that are important, but it is the more satisfied a mother is with her employment, the better she is as a parent. I'll say that about just about everybody. The more satisfied a man is, or a father is, with his employment, I would bet the better he is as a parent. So I have a little trouble just differentiating this as a mother thing. How the mother's work impacts depends on a number of things, whether she's working part-time or full-time. Part-time tends to be a little bit better because there's somebody home more often, particularly when the kids have to, well, if full-time mothers have kids that have to stay alone. When they're alone is when they're more likely to get into trouble. Why she's working, this can be problematic. If she's working and doesn't like what she's doing and she has to do it, then that has an impact. If she's working and she's doing things she really likes, that can have an impact. If she needs to work, that can have, and is working at something she enjoys, just the extra money can be a real positive thing. Partner support is extremely important. Studies demonstrate that women work in committed relationships, long-term committed relationships where both are working. The mothers tend to put in significantly more hours per week between the job and the stuff she does at home. Dads tend to come home, sit on their butts, and watch TV. They're done at the end of their day. Moms tend to not be that way. It needs to be fairer. It needs to be as even as possible. And if both partners are working full-time, then the home stuff should be shared. Kids should also be taught to take responsibilities over chores, and they should be responsible for taking care of some stuff too. Socioeconomic status is important. I've seen some fairly negative results as far as people who are well off and both parents work. Fairly often they both work long hours. They hire people to take care of their kids, and those are the people who do what the kids need. The parents tend to not be very effective at parenting lots of times. That may not matter too much if the people who are taking care of the kids teach them what they need to learn. But the kids fairly often have real problems with their parents. Care before and after school is extremely important. Some research shows that about 10% of 8 to 10-year-olds and 32% of 11 to 12-year-olds are home alone for an average of 1 hour. Now, some states, in fact, in many states, 8 to 10, that's illegal. But really what's going to catch, and actually for a bunch of them under 13 or 14, it's illegal. Whether you're going to get in trouble or not depends a lot on the maturity and the responsibility level of the kids. Some ways, girls tend to show better results. They tend to be more independent and structured and take more responsibility. But middle-class boys don't seem to do as well as girls do with their moms off at work. Keeping an eye on them, knowing what they're doing becomes more important as they get closer to adolescence. Poverty and parenting. Poverty is not a good thing. It says here about 17% of all U.S. children under age 18 live in poverty. This is, I think, if I remember right, this is the, as far as groups in poverty, it's the largest percentage of the population. Poor children are more likely to have emotional behavioral problems. They're more likely to suffer cognitively and scholastically. And a lot of the people who are poor, it's two-parent households, both parents working. They're undereducated, they don't have the experience, the jobs they need. So, I don't blame the poor for being poor. I don't think it's all their fault. I think there's, there was some research a while back, and we, that year, I think 3 years ago, we had a about 15 more millionaires produced in the United States. In the same amount of time, we had 1.5 million people enter poverty. So it works out, and I'm sure that's not a cause and effect, it's a correlation, but it works out for every person who turns into a millionaire, about 150,000 join the ranks of the poverty, of poverty. Family structure, traditional families, this is 2 parents household. The Leave It to Beaver family, mom and dad, called the nuclear family, mom and dad, 2 kids, Wally and the Beav. That is no longer near as prominent as it used to be. As this shows, in 1970, 85% of children were living with 2 parents. Now that's down to 69. I think we can drop that down even further. In fact, I heard just recently that about 50% of households are now, it's not the actual biological mother and dad that are living together with the children. Divorce, this is about statistically 50% chance of getting a divorce. And I do understand that this is a statistical thing, so half of you, when you get married, are not going to get divorced. I have people in my family who've been married and divorced 3 or 4 times, so they'll take care of a lot of y'all. So don't stress on that. But divorce causes major stress for everybody involved. A lot of things impact the ability for the child to adjust. How much conflict there was before the divorce. General rule of thumb is if you can get along and live together and stay together, that's the best idea. If you can't, if there's a lot of conflict, a lot of ugliness, then it's better for the kids if you don't. Some people dispute that, but then they use their own research methods. How old the kid is and how mature they are, what their gender is, the level of development. Girls tend to be angrier at their new dads. Boys tend to be angrier at their new moms or significant others, or whatever you want to call it. Used to be that moms got the custody. Still do most of the time, but dads are getting more and more, and joint custody helps a lot, is happening a lot more. Joint custody is custody shared by both parents. If the parents can get along and cooperate for the benefit of the children, then it's a positive thing. Other than that, it tends to just complicate matters, because it's real difficult to get things accomplished if one person's refusing to work with the other. Legal custody, joint, 2 different types. There's joint legal custody, where they have the rights to make all decisions about the children, and joint physical custody. Child lives part-time with each parent. Used to be that the child would spend most of the time with one parent and then have like summers or weekends, things, some holidays, things like that with the other. I knew one guy who married into a family. The mom and dad were not married when they had the child, but they had joint physical and legal custody, and the child spent 3 days with each parent. This not only really complicated the kid's life, because they really had trouble getting away, because neither parent would cut the other one slack to go on like a week vacation or something like that. So it tended to be real short trips. But the kid didn't seem to really have a home base. He kept bouncing between the 2. One-parent families are becoming, they're the trend. They're happening more and more all the time, particularly in certain ethnicities. This tends to be more difficult. Let me say this about divorce. About 1 million kids per year deal with divorce, And there's about a 50% chance that a child is going to be with a single parent for an average of about 5 years, unless that information is out of date. But it is a much higher percentage of families now, and it can work. Lots of kids come from single parent households and do real well, but it's a lot harder. It's a lot easier to have two parents. If you've got somebody to help back you up, support you, to bounce ideas off of, that tends to work better for the kids. But one parent can do it. It's just a lot harder. Some long-term effects. Most kids do okay. Big thing is, do not use your children as a weapon in a divorce. That is, somebody needs to be the adults. So if you're going to choose to get a divorce, kids don't get that choice. You make it as best you can for them. Some increased risk of antisocial behavior, difficulties with authority figures. Well, y'all are their first authority figures. Mom and dad are the primary authority figures. If they don't have real respect for them, it's hard to respect others. Dropping out of school, emotional, psychological problems, problems with relationships. You model your own relationships after the relationships you have been exposed to. So if your parents had a bad relationship, it increases the risks that you will too. Blended families, step families, make things more difficult. Can be up to 4 adults that the kids are dealing with. Can cause problems with bonding. The second marriage is less likely to work than the first one. A whole bunch of that is you've got a lot more people trying to work together. First marriage didn't work, and it started out with 2 people working together very often. Now you've got families trying to figure out how to live and exist with each other, and that just makes it a lot more complicated. They say that it's really important to set up your own new traditions. Instead of doing things like you used to at Christmas, Easter, whatever, set up something new that everybody can buy into. And as for discipline, the biological parent should be the primary disciplinarian. The step-parent should be supportive, but should not be the one who does the disciplining. Gay or lesbian families come out pretty much the same as heterosexual families. In fact, there's a lot more abuse and emotional problems coming out of kids who were raised in heterosexual families, not in homosexual families. About 2 million kids have at least one homosexual parent. We don't see anything that says homosexuals, gays, lesbians should not be able to raise kids to be just as healthy as other kids. In fact, a lot of times, particularly girls who are raised in lesbian households, have higher self-esteem and are much more comfortable with their sexuality. Both groups, boys and girls, may experiment a little bit more with same-sex activities in adolescence than regular kids, but the same number of kids or percentage of kids raised in heterosexual households turn out to be homosexual than if they are raised in homosexual households. So I'm real down on the marriage amendment. I think gays and lesbians should be able to get married. I think they should be able to raise kids, adopt them, foster them. I think they should have the same rights as everybody else, because there's no research that shows that they shouldn't. That's a moral, religious belief, and I don't buy into laws that are based on that instead of research. So we can't see anything that says it harms, and we see some stuff that says maybe it's even a little bit better, whether we like to think about it or not. Pets are great. I think kids and pets should go together as if possible. Depends on the environment, but it teaches the kids a lot. It gives them somebody who has loyalty to them, particularly dogs. But they have to take care of their pets, give them responsibilities. The pet gives back to them. It's just a real good way to go and helps them in dealing with other relationships a little bit later on. We'll talk about death later, but I recommend some small animals also, because that gives you an opportunity to go over death. Goldfish don't live very long lots of times. So it gives you an opportunity to deal with subjects like death in a reasonable way, hopefully before they lose somebody real important to them. So I just recommend pets of some sort or another. Go with your own desires and preferences, but again, dogs will love you regardless of what you do or say, so sometimes they're real handy to have around. Friends can be positive things. Our early relationships with our peers and our friends teach us how to have relationships that become more important. So positive, we get to practice communication, leadership, followership, sociability, intimacy. Gives you somebody to feel that you belong to or belong with, which is a good thing. Kids who are loners tend to have more difficulties. Negatives, cliques, people being prejudiced, being stereotyping, being ugly to people, restrictive. That does tend to reinforce prejudice, can foster antisocial tendencies, especially when, well, I won't go there yet. Sometimes we are pressured to do things to belong to the group, and sometimes those things we are pressured to do aren't what we know we should be doing. It is problematic, though, because even the loners tend to find friends. And so if nobody likes you, then you tend to be friends with people who also nobody likes. And again, this can reinforce the antisocial tendencies, and it's fairly often the loners and the one or two friends that decide to go kill a lot of people at school or something like that. Popularity is real important at this stage. There are a number of reasons why kids may be unpopular. They may be aggressive or hyperactive. People don't want to deal with them. If they're attentive or withdrawn, it's difficult to communicate with them, and a lot of people don't want to go to the extra effort, or sometimes the kids don't want them to go to the extra effort to try to be friends. Not being sensitive to other children's feelings, hurting their feelings and then just not caring, that sort of thing tends to irritate people. If they don't adapt to new situations, this is kind of characteristic of difficult children compared to easy children. Go back to aggression again. There's instrumental or proactive aggression, which is a way to get what you want. And then there's hostile aggression. Hostile aggression is just aimed at hurting someone. We talked about relational aggression with girls primarily, though it happens for both. The overt physical form tends to be boys, but not all the time. And what they see, or what we see in people who are aggressive, is they generally, if they're not exactly sure why somebody does something, they're going to see it as an attempt to hurt them, to use them, to abuse them, and that's what the hostile attribution bias is. I act aggressively towards other people because whenever there's doubt in a situation, I interpret their actions as hostile to me. If you Yeah, if you tend to think people have your best interest at heart, you tend to interpret their actions that way. If you think they're out to get you, you tend to interpret their actions that way. Media and aggression, yes, it shows, research has shown time and time again that media impacts children's levels of violence and aggression. So we do, you need to talk to your kids. It's primarily kids who are already aggressive tend to be more aggressive. But even at college ages, people who are exposed to video games that are violent tend to be more aggressive after they have played those games. So what you need to do, I'm not going to tell you can't let your kids watch TV, or don't let the kids watch violence on TV, because otherwise it's real hard for them to watch TV. The Roadrunner did some awful things to the Coyote, and the Coyote tried to do awful things to the Roadrunner. There's violence in everything. But you need to kind of sit down, watch some of what they're watching, discuss with them that this is make-believe and this is not how problems should be solved, and try to help them understand that this is about entertainment, not about reality. Bullies and victims. Bullying is aggression deliberately directed against a particular target or targets. Victims are usually weak, vulnerable, defenseless. This tends to be more hostile aggression rather than instrumental. Boys tend to be fairly equal in their bullying. They'll bully both boys and girls. Girls tend to pick on other girls. Fairly often, the bullies and the victims are fairly similar. They tend to be loners. The bullies tend to be bigger, but they tend to be loners. They tend to not get along or not be able to deal with other students very well. There may be some abuse at home. What we did with our kids was tell them sticks and stones may break my bones. Ignore people who just use words to try to hurt you. But if they start to use physical stuff, then the teacher, the bus driver, we need to know about that to deal with it. But otherwise, generally ignoring them is the best, unless it does get physical. Bullying does increase during middle school, tends to decline. Middle school is a real tough time. They're transitioning. Some kids get a lot bigger, a lot faster than other kids, and that can increase bullying. There's a lot of trying to figure out where you are in society, in the class and stuff, so this is a pretty tough time. Tends to mellow out better in high school. One area we do see groups of boys, though it's less often in high school, it tends to be a lot worse in high school because the behaviors of boys who bully as part of their group get a lot more violent and a lot harsher. We talked about the overt and relational aggression. What you want to do if you've got bullying problems with your kids, the bully, the victim, and the parents of both need to get together with the counselor, the principal, and learn and teach their children about this. There are better ways to deal with it. Kids should be able to go to school and have a safe, effective educational experience. Disruptive disorders, back to special ed type stuff. Oppositional defiant disorder. I used to say just being an asshole was not a handicapping condition, and then they came up with oppositional defiance disorder. So I have to amend that. Yes, being an asshole is a handicapping condition. This is a pattern of behavior persisting into middle childhood marked with negativity, hostility, and defiance. You probably ran into one of these kids. Anytime a teacher, anybody, an adult, corrected them or had to say much of anything to them, they just got real angry, threw fits, maybe got violent. It's problematic. Conduct disorder, about 9% of boys, 2% of girls. This is a repetitive, persistent pattern of aggression, antisocial behaviors violating social norms or the rights of others. Okay, oppositional defiance disorder sounds kind of like that, but oppositional defiance disorder, ODD, is focused towards generally people in power, people in supervisory positions, in authority, and fairly often they'll get along okay with their peers. Conduct disorder, they don't get along with much of anybody. These people tend to grow up to have what's called antisocial personality disorder, which is what we used to call that sociopaths or psychopaths. So this conduct disorder is when they are children and they act this way, they have conduct disorder. Once they turn 21 and they act this way, it's antisocial personality disorder. And you'll see things in their records like at 2 and 3, they're pulling animals apart, limb from limb, torturing things, just doing real nasty things. They do not learn. They don't seem to have a conscience. It seems to have something to do with the prefrontal lobe and the ability to understand pain to other people, how people feel. They don't have empathy. They don't have sympathy. They don't have much of anything. They tend to be pretty dangerous people. So that's what they grow into, antisocial personality disorder. Anxiety, mood disorders, school phobia or social phobia. This is, social phobia is just fear of groups of people or having to interact. School phobia is kids, a lot of their life is focused at school. It's kind of difficult to tell though. What you need to do if your child suddenly starts acting like they don't want to go to school, go check on things. Go talk to the teacher, a counselor, principal, friends, anybody you can, because if they're being bullied, it may not be a phobia. A phobia is an unreasonable fear. Being beaten up every day, fearing that is not unreasonable. So go check that out before you start figuring that your kid needs a psychiatrist or something. Can be separation anxiety disorder. Some kids just hate to leave the safety of home, the family. Generalized anxiety disorder does show, divorce, disruptions in life, that sort of thing can cause these. And sometimes some of these run in families also. So generalized anxiety disorder is just people who tend to be anxious about anything and everything. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, these kids tend to focus obsessively, that's thinking about things, and they do things compulsively. Those are the behaviors. And they're perfectionists. They want things to be a certain way, or they can't be happy about it. Things have to be scheduled, and their schedules have to go the way they're supposed to. Freud would have said that these kids are anal retentive. It doesn't have anything to do with their toileting or anything like that. It's chemical imbalance, and generally there is a chemical imbalance in all of these, but sometimes it's not like with school phobia, sometimes it can be induced. It's hard to tell whether the phobia causes the child to be fearful or whether things happen that cause the child to be fearful, and that builds into a phobia. Childhood depression, this is different than adolescent or adult depression. Those tend to be fairly genetic as far as it goes, though lots of people have some tendency toward depression. And childhood depression seems to be more on the school and the family environments and dysfunctional situations. So childhood depression needs to be dealt with. It's a major thing. Kids are committing suicide, and that's pretty sad. Some real quick stuff on treatment techniques. Individual psychotherapy, which then often goes into family therapy, because generally if your child is having difficulties, you are at least part of the solution, if not part of the problem. So fairly often, once they start to get a handle on things, the psychologists will want the family involved so that they can know what's happening and help with things. Behavioral therapy or modification, this can work if the kids buy into it. This is just, you teach them different things. Can use reinforcement, punishment, those sorts of things. Problem with behavior therapy or modification is that once they're out of treatment or the treatment situation, they know that there's nobody there to make them behave that way. So they have to choose to behave that way. So if they don't buy into it, it's not going to work. Art therapy, letting kids express themselves, it can help get a lot of anxiety out. It can help the therapist understand what's causing the anxiety or depression. I think art is just a good way to get some things out, some negative emotions that may be there. So I think art therapy is good for everybody, pretty much. Play therapy, again, a lot of the same stuff, allows them an opportunity to kind of freestyle, express themselves. You can watch how they play, help them deal with things through play. Drug therapy, it can be necessary. I think a lot of people, I think a lot of kids, I think a lot of adults are given drug therapy when they don't really need it. If you believe you can't deal with the world without drugs, then you're probably right. But if you think you can deal with the world without drugs, you've probably got a good chance of being right also. Just a few of the drugs: antidepressants for kids who are feeling that way, stimulants. It's interesting, kids, at least kids with ADHD, tend to react the opposite when they have stimulants like Ritalin. That tends to calm them down. Another thing you need to know is that they figure out real quick that they can sell those pills to their schoolmates for a pretty reasonable penny. Tranquilizers tend to help with things like OCD, kind of calms them down, balances out some of their feelings of anxiety. Antipsychotic medications, if the kids are starting to have schizophrenia, those sorts of things, then they can be helpful. Again, if your doctor wants to put your kid on these kind of things, go see a psychiatrist. If your psychiatrist wants to put your kids on these sorts of things, go talk to another psychiatrist first. Then you might want to do it. Fairly often what you'll see is the problems are really only that happen at school. And if that's what it is, then that's probably where the problem is. Your kid can't sit still for 6 hours at a time, can't hold it in for as long as they're supposed to, just can't fit the rules the way the rules have been made. Well, and that's most kids to some degree. But, if you're a boy, you're more likely to stand out and get some of this. If you're a minority, you're a little bit more likely to be picked out and deal with some of these drug therapies, because that's it helps you behave in school. It doesn't help you to learn much, but it helps you behave. I tell y'all what, I hope y'all have a great break. I hope that you have a safe and fun time. One of my fellow students at Tech said that you can't have fun and be safe at the same time. That's why I remind you, please buckle up that seatbelt, strap on that helmet, and have those condoms handy, just in case. It may not keep you totally safe, but it's a decent precautions. Okay, take care. Come back alive. Bye-bye.